Hello, hello, guys. Hello, everyone. Hello, my dear colleagues. Hello, guest. Don't worry if you were expecting to see Eva. She is with us. She is at the background. And let me please introduce myself. My name is Olga, for those who do not know me. And today I will be hosting the webinar with Lana. But don't worry, Eva is there as well. She's just at the backstage. So yeah, so happy to see you guys here. Again, my name is Olga. I'm a representative of SR Teaching and Learning in Poland. And today we're gonna do the webinar with Lana Betts from England. I hope you are looking forward to it, me for sure. Just before we start, briefly, I would introduce, for those who are watching us the first time, that SR Teaching and Learning is a global organization, international organization, globally recognized, which provides professional development for teachers, organizes the courses, longer term and shorter term. We'll also organize the free webinars just as this one. And we have our Instagram pages, which I will show you a little bit later. And this is actually the TESOL family where we unite as teachers, we share our experiences and we share our knowledge together. Here, I would like to pay your attention to this hashtag SR Webinar CW. This is creative writing. Please make sure to follow this hashtag on Instagram, on Facebook, and here on YouTube as well. And if you will be sharing your feedback after watching this webinar, please make sure to put this hashtag so that our presenter, Lana Betts, will see your feedback, and her friends as well will see it, and her colleagues, and we obviously as well will be able to see your feedback, whether you liked it or not, and whether you had any questions or so. So just please remember about this hashtag. And just to give you an idea of the upcoming events that we're gonna have in October and in November. So the big event which we're gonna have is TKT Module 1 preparation course. So this is the course for teachers who are aiming to do the TKT modules. This course is provided by SR Teaching and Learning Organization. It starts on the 31st of October and it has 25 hours in it. It is provided by the two wonderful tutors. So Paul Harvey from the UK, he's Salta Delta tutor, and Rashida Gilzim from Morocco, she's TKT Cambridge tutor. So on the 31st of October, why do you need this course? It doesn't matter whether you are a new teacher who is aiming to bring up your skills on the high level, or again, you're an experienced teacher and you also want to improve your skills, you want to develop yourself as a teacher and your career and your qualification, because TKT gives you internationally accepted qualification. This proves your language teaching abilities. So if you were waiting for the right moment, here it is. In case you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at our on our Instagram or Facebook or our website with email address, which we obviously share with you. Another event which is going to happen on the 23rd of October, Golden Rules for Teaching IELTS Academic Reading. This is the workshop which will be on Zoom platform, delivered by by Mr. Samad Samadov, the CEO and the founder of SR Teaching and Learning. So this is the workshop for those teachers who prepare their students for IELTS, and we all know that reading is one of the most difficult parts, and especially if it comes to academic reading. So Mr. Samad Samadov is highly a qualified and highly experienced person who is going to share with you some absolutely unique techniques and methods for helping your students to achieve their goals, the high band during the IELTS exam, of course. And what exactly you will hear during this workshop is why these texts, what exactly makes them so difficult, and what can you as an instructor do about it. So the IELTS reading strategies, exactly the proven formulas which are nowhere available for you, but Mr. Samat Samato is aware of them, and because he was the ex IELTS examiner, so he will share with you priceless and unique experience, of course. And yes, here on this slide you can see that another free webinar which is going to happen next Thursday on the 22nd of October will be delivered by Miss Svetlana Peckerman. She's our representative, SR teaching and learning representative in France. She's quite a unique teacher because she uses Montessori method in teaching English. So as you can see, she is a representative in France. She is a founder of online and offline course how to teach children English with Montessori methods. So she will be sharing her experience, what are the techniques and methods that help your students to learn English with ease, be excited about it, and just fall in love with English language, how you as a teacher can benefit from this. Svetlana is highly experienced teacher. She has over 15 years of teaching experience, and she's a qualified Montessori teacher. She's trained in Montessori methodology by Montessori Center in Canada. Please make sure to come next Thursday to this free webinar. You will definitely, I hope, find useful information and useful advice for yourself. Yes, and here you can see the slide, our Instagram page, which is held by Eva Tatarova, sr.teaching. Please make sure to follow us on Instagram because this is the most active page, and we share the news and updates of about all of the upcoming events. Apart from this, there are practical ideas and instruments for your classroom, for your lessons, some activities like weekly or daily activities, lesson plans, which you can just open the post and you can already have the lesson plan in front of you. Priceless, absolutely. And of course, you will find the feedback from our students about the courses, feedback from teachers who took our courses, who were with us, and they share their feelings about it. So you can learn about the courses from the first hands. And so as our teaching, this is Eva's page. You can communicate to her there, and this page is held by me, Teach, Love, Earn. This is a relatively new page, so that's why it's not popular, not so popular yet, but I warmly invite you to visit this page and follow me, of course, because we share different content on these pages. And what you will find here, probably the most what will spot your attention, is interviews with the teachers from around the globe. We already had interviews with the teachers from Ukraine, Azerbaijan, England, Argentina, France, Poland, Panama, Serbia, and more to come. Each and every interview has specific topic, and the teachers are sharing their experience as well, something what makes themselves unique, something what you will not find on the open source. For example, Olga from Ukraine is sharing her experience, how she became a TESOL speaker at the TESOL conference, what are the steps that she took, and how to choose your topic, how to present your topic in order to become the TESOL conference speaker. Mr. Raouf Pashebeli from Azerbaijan was sharing his success in opening his own TED Talks club at the school he works at, and how the students get the benefit from such clubs, and how they fall in love with English just tremendously. So what are the steps you need to take in order to present your idea to the administration of your school, for example? What are the steps you need to follow as well? And I had the interview with Svetlana as well. So before the next week webinar, you can check the interview where we're talking about the Montessori method in ELT. Also, I had the interview with the teacher from Argentina, wonderful Patricia, and she's talking about something like ludic pedagogy. Have you heard about it? Make sure to watch this interview because the ideas are also very important, the ones that she's sharing. And just yesterday there was the interview with the teacher from Poland, and also very interesting interview if you are thinking about becoming a teacher, maybe moving to Poland and becoming the English teacher in Poland, how you can find a job, what are the steps that you need to follow, or if you want to be a freelance teacher, also what the potential pitfalls or obstacles or just important steps to follow you need to keep in mind. So again, teach, love, earn. I'm waiting for you there. Hope to see you. And finally, today, Lana Betts from England is going to share with us 10 ways to take your students into the land of creative writing. So Lana will, just right now, she will appear here in our room. I will give you an idea about Lana.
Hi.
Hello, Lana.
Hi.
So good to see you. How are you today?
You too. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you to you and to Eva for inviting me, and to everyone who sent me emails and asked me to cover things. I hope I can do it justice today.
Sure. Oh, we're so glad that you will be sharing your experience, and I know that the advice is going to be also unique and priceless. Just to give an idea to our audience, Lana is a teacher from England. She has more than 8 years of experience, and she's been teaching business English and general English, and she worked in Germany and in England with the young learners and adults, and she has a lot of knowledge to share with you guys. So here we go. Lana, are you ready?
I am, yeah. I'm just going to mute you now so that I can't hear myself twice.
All right.
And I'm ready to get going.
Very good. So good luck to you, Lana, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, I'm Lana Betts. Welcome to my face and to my webinar about creative writing. I've tried to answer questions that I received in email. If there's anything I don't get to, you're welcome to contact me afterwards. All my contact details are in the slides, and I know that they're going to be available after the talk today. So don't worry too much about taking notes or anything like that. You'll have access to everything. So this is what we're going to cover today. I hope. I don't have much time. So we're going to look very briefly at lesson structure and a little bit more about warm-up exercises, what they're for and why they're so important for creative writing. We're going to look at something I call creative scaffolding, where we have different inspiration techniques and also different ways to help our learners get started writing stories. We're going to look at developing figurative language, and some exercises to help you explore similes and metaphors with your students. Explore intensity and description. We'll get to why that's important later. And then we're going to get to some more advanced stuff, like encouraging your students to play with structure encouraging any originality that they have, and things like adapting sentence length, structure, and just giving them a little bit of freedom to try out what they want. Maybe they'll start something totally new. You never know. So we'll then move on to correcting and editing, some sort of do's and don'ts. And if I have time, starting and ending stories. I may not cover that today because I've already covered that in an interview. If I have time, I definitely will. But everything is available on the slides and hopefully makes as much sense as it can without me presenting it. I will try and leave time for questions at the end. So please, if you have questions, write them down, think about them, bring them to me at the end, and we'll go through everything that we can in the time we have. So off we go. So lesson structure and warm-ups. So in the chat, why do we need warm-up exercises for creative writing? Just quickly write down why you think that that's important for teaching creative writing. Maybe you could think about what would happen if you didn't have warm-ups for creative writing. So stylistic devices we certainly need to focus on. Okay, any other suggestions? Why might we need like a warm-up exercise? What's that for? Well, it's to motivate, exactly. And really, it's also to get people in the headspace of creative writing. If you think about it, it's not really a muscle that we use very often in our daily lives. It's easier to move from your native language into English if you're talking about something you would ordinarily do already. So it's more of a translation exercise. Creative writing is complicated and very different from what we normally do. So the warm-up brings your learners into the space that you want them in, where they're already becoming creative. They're activating that part of their brain. So here are just some quick suggestions of ways that you can do that. I personally love one-word story, where if you have a group of people, this can be a lot of fun. Basically, you can have a starting word or some words that you need people to try and fit into your story. And as you go around a circle, each person on the circle can only say one word at a time. And you're trying to make it grammatically make sense. The fun of it is that no one person has control over that story. So you're going to end up with something pretty crazy. People are usually giggling and laughing, but they're also activating that part of their brain that's creative, that's thinking of things on the spot. And it loosens people up so they're not too worried about, looking silly in front of other people, because we're all looking silly, teacher included, myself included. So I've got some suggestions from other teachers as well, and just my suggestions, other teachers' suggestions, I've put them all together. So history of a picture is where you can take any old photograph and everybody looks at the photograph and you can just say, what happened before this? Everybody will have a completely different suggestion. Again, there's no correct answer, so everyone's coming up with something creative. The future of a sound is a similar idea where you play a sound and you say, what was that and what happens afterwards? Or you could say, what caused that? Who did that then? Just ask questions around that and people are forced to create something. Who's that in the background is a slight adaptation on the history of a picture where you have a photograph of some activity and people find it quite easy to come up with what's going on in the photo. Maybe two people are talking. But if there's someone standing in the background, we know nothing about them. Maybe your learners can create a history for that person and come up with who they are, why they're there. And these are great warm-ups. Many of them are also good for story inspiration later if people are getting kind of stuck. And nose memories is kind of a fun one as well, where we're taking advantage of the way the brain works. Noses and your sense of smell are the best way to bring up memories. So you can just bring some things like essences, herbal essences, something that smells really different, hopefully not horrible, and ask people what it reminds them of. And it might help them to make a picture or story around it. Close their eyes, what do they see? So I'm afraid, I'm so sorry I'm going so fast, but there's so much to fit in. So let's have a think about structuring our lessons now. I had a question about how to structure creative writing lessons. Does anybody have any examples of how they would structure bringing in a warm-up, you know, how you're going to get into the exercises and how you would finish and what kind of time zone that would be in? If you do, please write it in the chat. We'll see if anybody has any suggestions. Personally, I kind of shake up the normal sort of we're going to do everything in 1 hour idea, where you come in, you know, you've got your introduction right at the beginning, warm-up exercise, then you do the meat of the lesson, and then you know, you teach them something, then you practice something, and then you go away and do it for homework. I changed that a bit for creative writing because it's not a quick process. You're going to need to take time and allow time for that creativity. If anyone feels rushed, they're not going to be able to be creative. It's too stressful. So my recommendation for structure would be spend a good 5-10 minutes on that warm-up, because especially if this is the first time that someone's doing this, it can be a bit nerve-wracking, especially if you're shy. Creativity is a bit, you know, exposing. So give them time to feel comfortable. Give lots of exercises where people can come up with things like the background, the history, before you start the actual lesson of, okay, this is how we start a story, or we're going to look at similes or metaphors. And I would use the whole of the lesson to do that activity. And then you consolidate in the homework, because they've got all the time, space they need to go away and do that. Be creative, no one breathing down their neck, no one judging them. And then they can bring that back into the next lesson. And that can be super, super helpful, where you can get students to swap what they've done and spark off even more ideas. So I would encourage you to spread the normal 1 hour lesson idea over 2 lessons, really. And just keep repeating that process so that people get all that time at home to practice more. So moving on to the next one. This is what I call creative scaffolding. So this is a bit of a development on those warm-up techniques. Honestly, a lot of inspiration techniques are very similar to warm-up techniques. Some can be one way or the other, but it's a bit of a deeper look into, okay, we're not just doing this for fun now, we're trying to come up with original ideas. So one of these would be an ambiguous picture series, which is where you have photographs or drawings or clip art or drawing on the board or whatever it is, where there's no clear idea from what you're looking at what's happening. The idea behind that is that everybody will come up with a different story. And once you've got that, you then encourage people to develop that and add more and more details, which we'll get to in the story scaffolds. We had somebody earlier saying brainstorming. Very, very good point. Brainstorming is super, super useful for creative writing, especially if you've got more than one person, because it just encourages everybody to kind of throw all their ideas into one place, and then they can choose what they want to take from that, what goes together, what might be surprising. And brainstorming people, places, and things that happen is extremely useful later on for story scaffolding, which we'll get to in a second. Sounds in the dark. Everyone closes their eyes. You can give people cards beforehand that they have to make a sound in the room if you're working face to face, or you can play audio, much like the warm-up. The idea is that people will interpret things differently. Upside down story can be a lot of fun. If people are finding it very difficult to think of something they want to write about, get them to choose a story that they know very well and completely flip the narrative. A good one would be Father Christmas coming down people's chimneys, stealing all of their presents and running away every year if they've been a good child. It's funny, it's different, it's unusual, and it gives people the framework they need to then get creative on how are they going to describe Father Christmas? What descriptors are they going to use for how he comes down that ceiling? And it's just that little spark of inspiration people need sometimes that they can then run away with. We had somebody earlier saying senses and feelings, super important. When we're writing, we always remember to write about what we see. Okay, sometimes we remember to write about what we feel, sometimes, but only usually if we're writing from first person. So we're saying, oh, I felt this, I felt that. But what about what we touch? How hot something is? Does it feel bumpy under our skin? Is it dry? Does it feel unpleasant and mucky? Does it smell horrible? Well, not just horrible. What does it smell like? It smells like a toad. And so you start to build in the other senses, that feeling. You've got a feeling of how things are close to you. That's a feeling. Temperature is a feeling. You can smell, you can see, you can touch, you can hear. And the more your students bring these into their writing, the more advanced and developed and really enveloping the world that they create will be. So when you're reading that, you will feel like you're really being dragged into the story because your brain is trying to imagine those smells, those feelings, those touches. And that's a technique to help your students get from kind of basic to really, really good creative writing. So, talked a lot about story scaffolds. Let's talk about what they actually are. I call them scaffolds because they're a really good way of helping real beginners take steps in creative writing. So somebody who hasn't done it before and maybe is a little bit embarrassed about doing really creative things might find it really hard to just write a whole story from scratch. So we can make it easier for them. And I've kind of put these in order of what makes it easier. So easy at the beginning, and then like we're giving them more freedom and more space to be creative at the end. So the first one would be provide a whole text of a story and just take all the descriptors out. And then your students can go in and describe that person up the chimney and the way they move, because there's no answers in there. The person who's writing that has to decide for themselves, and it's all from their imagination. And there's not going to be two people in that room that have the same idea. You can then share that with the other people who are learning, and you won't have to do anything to demonstrate how utterly different you can make a story just by changing those descriptors. So that's a really, really good square one place to start with writing. Another thing where you can give somebody a little bit more freedom is you can write a story or provide a story, but there's no ending. And you say, okay, you've got 200 words, end this story. And that means that they already know who the characters are. They already know what's happened up to this point. All they've got to do is create something logical-ish, maybe, could be fantastic, and something that concludes that story. And that can provide a lot of pride, I suppose. People can get a lot of confidence out of that. They've really achieved something. They had all that freedom and they completed a story. And it's completely their own. Again, no two people will finish the story the same way. So dialogue with no context can be fun because you can have 2 people, 3 people talking, but the information about what on earth they're talking about is completely missing. So, for example, if you say, no, I'm not doing it. Well, yes, you are. Well, no, I'm not. I told you I wouldn't, but it's been 3 weeks already. And that's all they get. So they have to use their imagination to fill in those gaps and decide what that conversation is about. And they can then think about how did they get to this conversation? And they can then think about what happens because of this conversation. And once they've done that, they've written a short story, essentially. So that can be a good place to start. Provide the people, the place, and the happenings. So when we had our brainstorm earlier, you can literally say to people, okay, next step, take some people, take some places, and take some events. And just see what you can do. We're not looking for Stephen King in lesson 1. We're just looking for, can you make a story? Give it a go. Let's start. We'll come to this later, but it's really important to remind your learners that it's a learning process. You're not going to just write it in one go and it's going to be perfect. Everyone edits. Everybody edits, usually at least twice. So let's just start off with the story idea and then we'll come back and change things. The last one I would say is provide a beginning and an end. And if quite advanced, it can be very, very brief. You can literally say you have to get from here to here. How you do that is totally up to you. So those are some idea of story scaffolds. If you've got learners that have learning disabilities and find it difficult to use imaginative or creative thinking, that doesn't mean you can't do creative writing with them. It just means that you need to be more creative with your scaffolding ideas. So you can say, okay, give me logical ways that you could get from this beginning to this end. What are methods that could get you from here to here? That's not imaginary, creative thinking that somebody with Asperger's would find impossible, where traditional creative writing might be very, very difficult for them. They're doing more of a mental puzzle. How do I get from here to here? So that's a way you can get around that and help people to do creative writing no matter what their personal ability level is. Everyone can do it. Okay. How fast am I going? Pretty fast, but there's so much to do. I'm sorry, guys. So we're moving on. We're looking at developing figurative language here. And this is a monster slide, so I'll just try and explain it for you. So we'll look at similes, first of all. And the way I like to play with similes is to elicit from your learners some activities. It can be absolutely anything. I've chosen the examples of throwing a ball and jumping in a river. So you write them down, throw a ball, jump a river. And then you say, okay, let's look at throw a ball. Close your eyes. And when you think about throwing a ball, what is the very first image that comes up when you hear that? And people might just say throwing a ball. And you go, okay, keep going, keep going. What else comes with it? And eventually someone will say something like, oh, I see a car crash, something moving very fast, or a pistol. And then you can say, she threw the ball like a pistol. She threw the ball like a car crash. And for jumping in the river, I've had someone say, like a rock falling from the sky. And you think, wow, yeah, that's pretty descriptive. So he jumped into the river like a rock falling from the sky. And you look at those together and you say, like, well, what's the difference between he jumped in the river and he jumped in the river like a rock falling from the sky? And you should get responses like, oh, it's much more involving as a reader. It brings you into it. You can kind of imagine the sounds of that. It sounds like he's falling very quickly and there's a big splash. And then you have to be a bit creative because it depends on what they come up with. It's your job to kind of think of what the opposite of that might be. So instead of she threw a ball like a pistol, you could say she threw a ball like a wet rag. Wow, that's taken all of the excitement and violence out of that throwing a ball like a pistol. And when you explore that with your learners, they should see the difference of just changing that simile to a different activity that you're comparing it with can completely change how you imagine in your mind what that would look like. Like throwing a ball like a wet rag, you imagine it just falls out of your hand and splats on the floor. It's somewhat comical, whereas throwing a ball like a pistol is violent, it's loud, it's very fast, it's exciting as well. So it can completely change the tone in your story. And you can do that a few times and explore other ways that you could change those same similes, and even just stay with the throwing a ball. You can get hundreds of different ideas that really change that tone. And that should be a really good lesson for your learners on how important a simile is and how much it controls what your story sounds like to the reader. Oh, I need to go back. There we go. Next one is making metaphors. This is a bit harder. I think everyone finds teaching metaphors kind of difficult because there's something that kind of comes naturally to you, but you can teach them. I think a good way I often start is to say, okay, we all know that you can break a heart. What does that mean? Like, why do we say that? Is it true? Is the heart really broken? And obviously they'll say no. So why do we say that then? You'll probably get something like, like it's very painful. We feel like it will never be fixed again. It gives you a real image that person is actually physically ill because of their sadness. And all of these are excellent answers. So really it's bringing that image into your mind, and it's bringing all that information with what a broken thing in your body would be into a very small sentence. So it's a very powerful method. And to demonstrate this, you can play a game where you flip metaphors. So you can put up some pretty common ones like, oh, she has a sunny smile, and ask people like, what's the opposite of that? Just flip it. Well, she has a chilling smile. Okay, so she's gone from being someone really friendly and warm to someone pretty terrifying, this little smiling psychopath. What a change in the way that you would interpret that. An icy look, again, can go the other way. It can become a warming look. So instead of being angry at you across the room, they're now like, oh, making you feel good. And you can do it for descriptions as well, like she was like an ugly duckling. She was an ugly duckling. Oh no, she was a beautiful swan. A blunt instrument, which is something we say quite a lot in the UK to say someone's not very intelligent. Well, now they're a sharp knife. That means they're very smart. So you can explore what the differences would mean for a character. Maybe take some excerpts from a book. After you've done this a little bit and introduced it, and just say like, can we flip that? Can we flip that description of that character and turn them into something totally different? And does that remind us of anyone else in this story? Because often it does. Often you've got opposites in books. Yeah, maybe put them into groups, get them to discuss what that metaphor means, and then ask them to flip it. See what they can do. Breathing space, let's move on. So, exploring intensity in descriptions. My way of doing this is to do hot and cold, and I think we all do this with things when we're talking about the intensity of descriptors. People get kind of stuck with very strong, very big, very small, and it gets stale. It doesn't show a great deal of vocabulary or that they have very good dynamic control of the language. So you can break them down and brainstorm them whenever you find that someone's repeating something too much, and add a few that are new. So, for example, just say, okay, we've got this building, it's very tall. What other words do we have that are synonyms or close? And just brainstorm them all over the board or all over the web board or whatever you have. And those are your other options. So then you want to start thinking about what's hot, what's cold. So cold is when it's not very much of that. It's not very tall. It's either average or small. And then you move all the way up to gigantic. And you ask them, can you put them in order? If you have a physical classroom and you have people physically in the room with you, you could ask them to take a word and line up in order of what they think is hottest to coldest or coldest to hottest. And you can give them a story scaffold and ask them to apply descriptors to it and play with what makes them sound scary or funny or boring or dramatic just from changing which descriptors they're using, whether they're very hot ones or very cold ones. If they have very cold ones, they'll find they get an extremely boring story. If they have very dramatic ones, it might be a bit too intense and sound too silly. And that's a good way for people to explore the difference in just choosing which description you want of something. And you can play with that by providing a story to your learners where everything that is described is just very something. He had a very big hat. He went to school and it was a very long way away. And when you give that out to people in groups or by themselves, their challenge is to go away in groups or alone, maybe for homework, and change everything where it says very something into a proper descriptive word. Something out of your hot and cold list, or something they know themselves, or maybe they can go away with a thesaurus or a dictionary and find out other words for themselves and try them out. And I would encourage you to make a game of it if you can. So reward like really original ideas, because everyone can say that something is big or large, but do they know gigantic? Do they know humongous? Do they know gargantuan? So if you can reward originality, it would encourage people to go a little bit outside their comfort zone and try some new things. Whistle stop tour. Yeah, overusing some words is very common. Absolutely. And like if you're looking at their written work, you'll see it again and again and again. And it's it's a combination of being either not having the vocabulary to describe it more specifically than that, or they're too timid to go outside of the comfort zone of the words they know work. So you've got to kind of encourage them to just, well, what does it matter if you use a word that doesn't really fit there? You'll just learn something. It's fine. Okay. Playing with structure and encouraging originality. So this is where you're getting to things where your learners are more advanced. So maybe they're older if you're working with children, or maybe you've been working with somebody for a long time and you've gone through all the basics and now they really want to push themselves. So my question is to you, look at these examples from texts. Would you correct the following if they were submitted to you? So the first one is, we've got, no, he said. What do you mean, no? Emma replied. I said no. So there we have unusual punctuation. And the next one, we've got Nathan, 26 years old, born in France, thought to be one of Europe's greatest engineers and astronauts. Specialities, botany and mechanical engineering. And the last one, I was waiting for it all to change, ready and prepared. No, I wasn't. That was a lie. I was just waiting, not even thinking. So some people would be tempted to correct these. The reason being, the first example has very unconventional use of speech. So there's no speech marks when people are talking. I would not correct that, because it's still clear that people are talking. It's still clear because they've said, he said, Emma replied. This is original use of language, but it's still clear what the meaning is. Now, some hardcore teachers would want it to be perfect, but at the end of the day, language is more of a construct that we all agree on. And I know famous authors that write like that, and it's totally fine. Some Irish authors write in that way. And it's just considered a thing that they do, and it makes them special. The second example with Nathan is something that a 12-year-old student of mine wrote. And I would not correct that either, because it gives you the idea that you're reading somebody's personnel file on a spaceship. What a brilliant way to give your reader a crash course on a character. You literally just lay it all out in front of them. And if you give them a little introduction where it just says personnel files and then write all of that, your reader immediately knows what's going on. They immediately imagine themselves in front of the table reading information on that character. So that was a really original thing with no prompting from me that my student came up with. And I thought, wow, that's really good. Carry on doing stuff like that. And the last one is from Handmaid's Tale. She goes back on what she says a lot. She corrects herself. And that's part of the way that that character speaks. She lies to herself, but then she corrects herself when she's speaking to the audience. So again, a lot of people would say it's too conversational, there's not enough description. But if that's the way that your story is structured and it's all a first-person account, like The Handmaid's Tale, then that fits. It fits the tone, it fits the style of the story, and it's something special and unique to that author. And I would encourage it, honestly. As long as you can make sense of it and you understand what's going on, I think it's best left alone. So things you can explore with your learners about the structure of writing that can help them to understand deeper concepts of creative writing would be the difference between having long and short sentences. It's a very, very easy, very powerful tool if you have lots of long sentences and then one really short one. The person reading it is suddenly shocked into noticing something. So you could have a very long description and then your reader is suddenly thrown into some action. And that's an amazing way of changing the pace. It's almost as if the person writing it was surprised by what happened and they suddenly changed their attention. And the person reading it will get that feeling too. The difference between formal and informal language, the difference between just writing what happens and what you smell, think, hear, feel. You can explore that by taking the same text and adding those things in or taking them out and discussing how different it feels as a reader to go through that, because it will feel different. It could slow it down too much, or that description. It could make the action boring because we don't care what he's thinking about. He's hitting the man over a head with a spade. Or it could be that there's no action going on right now, or someone wants us to pause in the moment and really focus on that background. Depending on how it's done, it could be really creative and interesting. You could describe a photo that was taken in that really active moment, or you could just be slowing the pace down to describe a long, slow walk through the countryside. And all that description just really adds in how tired all those people are and how weary they are after the battle they just had. So adding those things in or taking them out can change the pace, the feel, everything. Explore story order. What are you going to do with the time in your story? You can do it chronologically from beginning to end. Nothing wrong with that. It's much easier to understand, but you can tell it backwards. You can tell it where you jump in time forwards and miss bits out. Just off the top of my head, I'm thinking of a way you could write a story where you have a character that tells you everything that happens until something gets too scary, and then she jumps to the next bit and tells you everything that happens, and once it gets too scary, maybe she tells you a little bit more, and then she jumps onto the next bit. What you do need to do, though, is come back at the end and describe the bits that were missing. Otherwise, your reader's going to be really annoyed because they won't know the answers. But they can be a bit like a cliffhanger in a TV series, something where your reader thinks, I need to keep reading because I need to find out what she's not telling me about. And if you tease it and give out little bits, it will be fascinating to them. Like, oh, and now I found out that it was something that happened when she was abroad with her friends. And every time you add a little bit in, you're slowly feeding that interest until they are just dying to find out what she's not telling them. You can also explore with your learners the difference it makes to change the narrator. So we tend to speak from the point of a totally removed narrator, but we could narrate it from the point of one of the characters, someone telling a story about what happened to their children, or anything. The choice is yours, really, but the difference in feeling for the reader for that can be quite big, and it can really change how you present that story as well. So moving on to the next bit, correcting and editing creative writing pieces. So like I kind of hinted at before, everybody edits. I don't think you get told that enough when you're first starting out, that you're not going to submit a perfect piece of work just through proofreading it once, because no one can do that. Edgar Allan Poe couldn't do that. James Joyce couldn't do that. Stephen King couldn't do that. He spent 30 years writing the Dark Tower series. He went back and edited that hundreds of times. That's why it's so good. So if we encourage our learners to remember that the first phase is just get that idea explosion out there. That's where all the fun stuff's going to come out to begin with. And you might edit in some extra storylines and things later on. But to begin with, just get as much information out there as you can. Phase 2, kind of come back to it. Correct little mistakes. Focus on what kind of tone you want it to have. Like, who do you want to narrate it? Do you want it to be spooky? And just make sure that the tone is consistent all the way through. And then the last phase is just little tweaks until you're really happy with it. And maybe I should say phase 4, no one is ever super, super happy with it, but that's writing. Just to give your learners the freedom to know that they're not going to be perfect straight away. Set their expectations realistically, that it's a process. You're going to learn it. Oops, done it again. Repetition of the same word is a clue that this person needs to expand their vocabulary or their confidence. So explore synonyms with them and explore different words that have different intensities to help them stick to the tone that they want. The next one is so common. Correct long rambling sentences. They slow the pace of a story, something terrible. We've all read a book where we've just lost the will to live. Some of them I just say to myself, if you don't get better in 100 pages, I'm out, because I have a life to live, and I will not be able to read every book in the world before I die, but I'm not going to waste my time on this one. So try and get them to break it down. Keep the content, but break it down into shorter, punchier sentences with less description, less repetition. Ask them to read them back and see which one they prefer and what difference it gives them when they read it. Another very, very, very common thing people do is starting with a comparative. Oh, it kills the English teacher inside me. So starting with a sentence or a paragraph with later, but, or and, it could be a stylistic choice. They could be exploring structural freedom, but it still doesn't. It still needs to make sense. So if it doesn't make sense, you've got to say to them, look, if I took that sentence out, I wouldn't have a clue what you were referring to. So reorder the sentence. You can still have it comparative in there. Just make sure the comparative isn't the first word. Because as soon as I see later, I'm wondering, later than what? The next thing you will come across, and probably the thing you'll come across the most, is overly literal sentences, because most people who are learning English as a second language will have been taught English to communicate information very clearly, not to be creative with it. So you will start there. That's normal. So ways that you can help people to make their sentences less literal is to remove information. So if we've got, she put on a coat because she was cold, that's really boring because we're not doing anything. We're reading bland facts. But if we remove some information, she wrapped the coat around her. Now, I, as the reader, am doing some of the work. She's probably cold. Okay, it's not a massive advancement, but I am doing some of the work and it's sparking my imagination a little bit as the reader. You can then add feelings, thoughts, or sensations. So she shivered, wrapped the coat tighter around her, that rough leather smell filling her head. Dad. So now we're like, oh, okay, that coat's from her dad, probably, and it's made of leather, and I can imagine that smell, and she must be cold because she's wrapping it around her and she's shivering. And then you can start to change the perspective. Maybe we just focus on the object. Maybe we don't even say what it is. She needed it. Without it, she would freeze. It was all he had left her when he disappeared. Just one leather barrier between her back and the freezing winds. We've never said it was a coat. We've never said that she was cold. We've implied everything, and the reader has to do that work themselves. So you can explore these effects with your learners and help them to take the literalness out of their writing. And, you know, encourage them to start literal if that's easier for them and edit it down. Eventually, they will start to just go straight to the point where it's figurative and not literal. And most important thing is people will do a lot of tonal drift. They will go from comedy to serious to very dramatic to a bit boring because they're learning all of these descriptive words possibly for the first time, and they're not going to be absolutely ace at getting the tone consistent all the way through. And it's just about saying, like, do you think that all fits in with a scary story? What stands out? And you can work on it together and say, okay, so we want that word, but we want something that's more serious, more frightening. Okay. Sorry, I'm going at the speed of light, but there's so much to do. Next, we're going to do the whistle-stop tour of starting and stopping stories. So this is how I teach people how to start a story. This is by no means the only way to do it. It's just an easy way to teach people for the first time of where to start, because starting is the hardest part. So I ask my students to think about, create questions about characters, questions about place, questions about what happens next, or questions about what happens before, because your first paragraph is your one shot to get your reader to want to know more. The best way to do that is to get them to ask questions. And just like we did before, if you remove information, they're going to want to know the answer. That's just naturally how our brains work. Do not have time to go into that, but it's in the slides. You can read some examples. Ending a story, you want to avoid the end, or they all lived happily ever after, or Einstein once said, or maybe he'll be under your bed tonight, because they're very old. We've all seen them before. There's nothing new about that. And we're going to feel a bit cheated when we get to the end of the story if we could really predict what it was going to say. So encourage people to tie up those questions that you've left open at the end so that people feel rewarded for getting there. people don't live happily ever after, they live realistically ever after. So if you want your characters to have a great time in the future, give them a good time with some bad times, because that's normal life and that's more believable. Explain the mystery or reveal the secret, because if you don't, people will be furious with you. They've put a lot of time and effort into reading your story and they want to know what the answer is. You can end with a quote. I was asked that once, can you end with a quote? Yeah, I would take a quote from one of the characters. What have they learned from their journey? What sort of nugget or takeaway advice would they give the reader based on what's happened to them? Would they say, never take your relationship with your father for granted? That would be a really powerful way to end a story. And do you want to leave something open? Do you want your reader to think about what that could mean, come up with their own idea, or do you want to tell them what that idea is? That's up to them. So that's the end of my presentation. We've got back to the slide with my lovely face on it. I teach English for business, general English, all specialized to your interests and to your personal field. So I also teach school tutoring lessons and IELTS exam preparation. All of my information is there if you'd like to get in contact with me. And I think all that's left, if anybody has any, is does anyone have any questions for me?
Lana, thank you so much. It was absolutely inspiring, and you brought
I feel like I needed 3 hours.
Yeah. Actually, you were not moving too fast, so don't you be worried. Yeah, it was just perfect. But you brought up a lot of interesting ideas. Even some of them which we may have heard about. And as teachers, we might be using those. But it's always good to put them in order and just to bring them up. But I was absolutely impressed by the idea of the missing descriptions, for example. Personally, I never used it, and that's just impressive. It's very nice. It's interesting idea, and using the opposites for the metaphors. I actually have my notes here, so
that's what I do every time I attend a webinar too. I have a huge list of notes.
Yes. We all study from each other, so thank you so much for delivering all of these priceless techniques and methods.
Oh, you're super welcome, and thanks to everybody who wanted me to come do it. It's been fun, and I hope everyone gets something from that. I mean, absolutely. I'm sure you already knew about half of it at least, because I've just gathered things from other people and my own ideas together. So we've all got something in that bank there that we can draw on.
Sharing is caring, we keep saying.
Was it creative writing for all level students or for special groups? I think a lot of it's applicable to really low-level beginners, like a lot of the warm-ups and stuff. I wanted to make sure that you had stuff you could just start with, because a lot of people won't have done it before in a second language. But a lot of it you can apply to higher level things, especially structure, originality, changing the lengths of sentences, the different levels of descriptors. That's more advanced. That's much more advanced. And I think everyone can learn, native people can learn from that. That's what I learned in my English lesson. So I think you can apply that to all levels, really. You just got to adapt it to, your learners, so adapt it to what works for them, really.
Yeah, well, all teachers go creative once it comes. We need to adapt it to the age group, to the individual students, and so on. Lana, we have a lot of thankful comments, excellent presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Asar. Guys, you are very, very welcome.
Hello everyone. I just wanted to let you know that I was watching this webinar together with you. This was our first try when we had just 2 hosts together, and I do hope that you liked it. Guys, I was really impressed to see how many countries we had. Actually, I decided to count, and we had Ukraine, hello Ukraine, the UK, Lana, Poland, Olga. We had Myanmar, Kazakhstan, Morocco, Philippines, Turkey, Uzbekistan, Georgia, Algeria, Azerbaijan. Can you imagine the whole world is here watching this wonderful webinar about 10 ways to take your students into the land of creative writing? So, as far as you know, we're going to have lots of wonderful events soon. Actually, I sent you the link. You can check everything there. And I'd like to remind you guys, the only one thing you can do to thank Lana, just write your feedback on your Instagram or Facebook pages, and don't forget about that hashtag SR webinar CW Creative Writing, and then Lena will be able to find your feedbacks, and also don't forget to contact her. Lena, can you remind us your Instagram page?
I can. It is. Oh, now you're asking. It's Learn English the Right Way, but it's learn_English_the_right_way. So
Yeah.
not my choice, by the way. Someone else chose that. But all of my contact information is in that presentation. If you want the slides, you can.
Oh, yeah, all those who registered for this webinar, you will get the presentation later on, and there you can find Lana's contact details as well. So, Olga, thank you so much for hosting this webinar. It was really great.
Thank you,
I enjoyed
Ivana. It was my pleasure.
every single moment here. And I like that idea that we shouldn't end the story with the end words. And eventually, the idea of that song from Bandiana, do you remember? This is the end, Skyfall. And I decided that we can start the story from the words, this is the end. So actually, this is the end of our webinar, but it's the start of the next story. Right? Lana, thank you so much for everything. Olga, thank you so much. Sudan, hello. Yeah, I should include this country into my list as well. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, see you next Thursday. Montessori method in ELT is waiting for us. See you guys. Bye bye.
Bye
Peace, you,
bye.
love you. Thank you so much.